Hurricane Erin is approaching the eastern seaboard of the United States, not as a sudden cataclysm, but as a slow, grinding reminder of structural vulnerabilities that the nation has allowed to fester for decades. The storm has already inflicted heavy rainfall and flooding in Puerto Rico. It is now running parallel to the coastline of North Carolina, and it is projected to generate storm surge and inundation across a vast swath of territory stretching from Florida to Massachusetts. At first glance, this is another predictable weather emergency, another evacuation order for barrier islands, another warning about roads washed away. But if studied closely, Hurricane Erin is not merely a meteorological event. It is a geopolitical signal. It is a live demonstration of how climate instability intersects with infrastructure, fragility, economic exposure, and national security readiness. The Outer Banks of North Carolina provide a symbolic case study. Tourists have departed, residents are urged to evacuate, and officials warn that Highway 12, the single artery connecting Hatteras Island and Ocracoke Island to the mainland, could be washed out by storm-driven waves. This is not a trivial matter of inconvenience. It is a microcosm of American coastal vulnerability. A single roadway represents the lifeline of entire communities. If that lifeline is severed, citizens are stranded. Emergency services are delayed. Supplies cannot flow. What appears to be a local problem is in fact an indicator of a national pattern. Across the United States, both Atlantic and Gulf coasts rely on fragile barrier systems, single transport arteries, and aging protective infrastructure. Every hurricane reveals the same reality. The United States is not structurally resilient to predictable climatic stress. The projections for Hurricane Erin suggest waves of 15 to 20 feet, high enough to batter elevated homes from their pilings and carry debris inland. This is not only about individual property loss, it raises the broader question of coastal real estate, insurance markets, and the sustainability of American settlement patterns. Billions of dollars are tied to housing and tourism along these vulnerable corridors. Each storm erodes not just the sand, but the logic of development. And yet, year after year, construction continues. Federal programs subsidize rebuilding in areas that will inevitably flood again. The cycle continues, creating moral hazard. Private gains are secured, while public resources are drained. This cycle is not simply economic mismanagement. It is a national security risk, because each additional dollar spent on repeated reconstruction is a dollar not allocated to defense, technological innovation, or strategic competition with adversaries. Hurricane Erin is therefore not just a meteorological disruption. It is a fiscal signal of misaligned priorities. As evacuation orders spread, residents face a choice: leave now and maintain connection to the mainland, or remain in place and risk isolation. Many choose to stay, storing water and food, prepared for days without electricity. This posture may appear resilient, but it also reveals complacency. American disaster culture has normalized the expectation that storms will knock out power, destroy infrastructure, and require communities to endure days of disruption. In other words, Americans are adapting to fragility rather than correcting it. Each household improvises instead of the state reinforcing. This is not resilience, it is resignation. And adversaries abroad notice. For rival powers, every hurricane is an intelligence opportunity. The images of highways flooded, homes destroyed, and populations displaced are reminders that the United States faces internal vulnerabilities which cannot be shielded by aircraft carriers or nuclear deterrence. Hurricane Erin will not make direct landfall in North Carolina. Yet the warnings extend far beyond the Carolinas. Storm surge watches, coastal flooding advisories, and rainfall projections extend from Florida to Massachusetts. This demonstrates another critical dimension: scale. In a country that stretches across a continent, a single storm can simultaneously stress multiple states, governors, and emergency systems. Coordination requires federal and state collaboration, yet American disaster governance is fragmented. Federal agencies provide assistance, but state authorities control evacuation and emergency measures. Political divisions often determine the speed of response. During every storm, one sees the same tensions: federal relief contested by state leadership, accusations of underpreparedness, debates about whether funding is adequate. Each of these tensions is magnified under the lens of geopolitics. A rival nation, analyzing the American response, sees not only a storm, but a stress test of federalism. When a disaster exposes political fault lines, it also exposes governance fragility. The significance of this event extends into energy and logistics. Coastal flooding threatens ports, refineries, and distribution hubs. The eastern seaboard is a critical corridor for global shipping, and even temporary closures ripple through supply chains. Petroleum facilities, electricity substations, and internet cables are concentrated in vulnerable zones. A hurricane that never makes landfall can still knock out critical infrastructure through surge, wave, and rain. If even one port along the eastern seaboard shuts down for several days, shipping schedules across the Atlantic are disrupted. European allies awaiting goods experience delays, supply chains tighten, costs rise. What begins as a weather system evolves into a disruption of transatlantic commerce. In an age when logistics are a strategic weapon, this is not trivial. China and Russia observe these patterns with precision. They note that storms can do what sanctions or blockades cannot: slow the American economy without a shot fired. Historical context makes this clear. Hurricane Katrina in 2005 was not only a humanitarian catastrophe, it was a global image crisis for the United States. The sight of a superpower, unable to rescue its citizens in New Orleans, eroded international perceptions of American competence. Hurricane Maria in 2017 revealed how Puerto Rico, an American territory, remained without power for months. Again, the message to the world was not about weather, but about governance. Hurricane Erin is unlikely to reach the catastrophic scale of Katrina or Maria, yet it belongs to the same continuum of events that demonstrate the fragility of American domestic resilience. Each storm adds to the archive of evidence. Rivals build a narrative. The United States can project power abroad, but it cannot always secure its own citizens at home. This narrative is not entirely fair, but geopolitics is rarely about fairness. It is about perception. Climate instability intersects directly with military readiness. Bases along the eastern seaboard face flood risks. Norfolk, home to the largest naval station in the world, is threatened not only by storms, but by long-term sea level rise. Every hurricane is therefore not just a weather event. It is a rehearsal for a scenario in which American naval power is constrained by natural forces. Imagine a crisis in the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea unfolding at the same moment that a hurricane floods American coastal bases. The dual demand on resources would create stress. Adversaries know this. They watch the forecasts with as much interest as meteorologists, calculating whether a storm could delay deployment or create opportunity. This is the global layer of what appears to be a domestic story. Hurricane Erin is not only testing North Carolina, it is testing the American strategic posture. Economic implications extend far beyond the coastline. Insurance markets are strained with every new storm. Premiums rise. Insurers withdraw from coastal regions. States create backup funds, but these funds are finite. When major storms strike, the cost is absorbed not only by local economies, but by national taxpayers. Each storm, therefore, redistributes wealth, drains federal budgets, and pressures fiscal priorities. At the same time, financial markets monitor exposure. Every forecast of damage translates into calculations of losses, payouts, and potential bailouts. Investors consider not only the storm, but the pattern. An economy that repeatedly absorbs billions of dollars in climate losses is an economy with structural drag. Rivals understand this. For China, which is already confronting its own economic slowdown, watching American storms provides both relief and opportunity. Relief, because the United States is also vulnerable. Opportunity, because every dollar Washington spends on storm relief is a dollar not spent on geopolitical competition. The human dimension cannot be ignored, but in strategic analysis it must be reframed. Evacuation orders, displaced families, destroyed homes, these are tragedies. but they are also demographic movements. When populations repeatedly relocate from vulnerable coastlines, entire regions undergo slow transformation. Migration inland changes political maps, alters labor markets, and pressures urban centers. Over decades, this could shift congressional representation, electoral college votes, and therefore national political balance. Climate-driven migration is not only a humanitarian issue, it is a political reconfiguration. Hurricane Erin itself will not cause such large-scale migration, but it is one more event in a sequence that gradually erodes the logic of coastal settlement. And as settlement patterns change, so does political power. This is why every storm is not only a natural disaster, it is a political accelerator. The psychological aspect is equally important. The normalization of disruption creates a population accustomed to fragility. Citizens expect to lose power, expect roads to flood, expect insurance rates to rise. When fragility becomes normal, complacency takes hold. This weakens the collective will to demand systemic correction. Instead of demanding hardened infrastructure, citizens buy generators. Instead of demanding resilient grids, they stock bottled water. This pattern benefits adversaries. A nation that adapts to fragility rather than correcting it is a nation whose long-term strength is eroded quietly. Rivals do not need to strike, they only need to wait. Each storm does the work for them. Globally, Hurricane Erin contributes to the narrative of climate as a force multiplier in geopolitics. The United States, China, and Russia are all vulnerable to climate shocks. But the difference lies in governance response. When authoritarian states mobilize, they do so with coercive capacity. When democracies mobilize, they must negotiate among stakeholders. The strength of democracy is legitimacy. Its weakness is speed. During disasters, speed matters. If the perception grows that the United States is too slow to protect its citizens from predictable storms, that perception corrodes credibility abroad. Allies may wonder if Washington can protect them during geopolitical storms. Adversaries may conclude that American bandwidth is limited, easily absorbed by domestic crises. This is why Hurricane Erin matters not just to residents of North Carolina, but to observers in Beijing and Moscow. The final layer is strategic signaling. The United States must demonstrate not only compassion for its citizens, but competence in its systems. Each hurricane is therefore not only a test of meteorological forecasting, but a test of governance, communication. Evacuation orders must be clear, relief must be timely, restoration must be credible. If the United States fails, the signal abroad is weakness. If it succeeds, the signal is resilience. Hurricane Erin will not decide the balance of global power, but it will contribute one more data point to the narrative. And narratives matter. In international competition, perception often precedes reality. The image of flooded highways, isolated communities, and destroyed homes may linger longer in the minds of foreign leaders than the precise wind speed of the storm. And so, as Hurricane Erin churns off the eastern seaboard, the true story is not only about waves and rain, it is about the United States confronting once again the limits of its own resilience. It is about infrastructure stretched thin, governance challenged by scale, and adversaries watching with patience. It is about the intersection of climate and strategy, where every storm becomes a rehearsal for broader crises. Hurricane Erin may pass without catastrophic loss of life or property, but it will leave behind a record, a memory, a signal. And in the quiet calculations of foreign capitals, that signal will be studied carefully, for storms do not only erode coastlines, they erode assumptions of strength.